Hey, I'm Dean and this is Legacy Voyage. In Season 1, I'm documenting my journey to earning my first 100K net worth as a full-time college student. Join me as I share some of the lessons I learned along the way.
I know it's been ages. Man, it's kind of crazy how long it's been since I've done one of these. And honestly, the past couple ones have been in like month increments. But regardless, your boy is back. Hopefully, I'll be more consistent given the hectic schedule with everything. But I'll give the updates first. The story for this episode. Let's see. Well, a couple weeks back, there was a student in one of my classes, and we're kind of teammates on one of these projects. And so we start catching up, start talking. He's asking me about what I'm working on. I asked him about what he's working on. He told me, he's like, "Hey, D, I'm working on this podcast." And I was like, "Bro, tell me more and more about this podcast." And he started talking me up. He's like, "Okay, this is called Mama, I Made It. We just interview people who, in quotes, kind of made it in some way and just talk about their story, ask them questions, things like that." And the premise of the podcast honestly seemed really cool. I love the name, Mama, I Made It. It's just a really cool concept, a really cool idea for this podcast. And then I asked him, I'm like, "Hey, how many episodes have you put out?" And he said, "Well, we've recorded a bunch, right? But we haven't really put out any." And I was like, took a step back, "Bro, you haven't published a single episode?" And he said, "Yeah, because we really want to make sure that it's top quality, and when we start posting, we can be super consistent on it. We really don't want to miss a week of posting." And I'm over here like, first of all, very surprised, very taken aback, because it's been a while since I was like, "Bro, what are you doing not putting this stuff out there, not failing forward?" And it reminded me exactly how I was. And we can go back and listen to it, honestly, a couple podcast episodes back, probably not too far along, reset, probably not too long ago. But this past summer, I was literally in the same mindset. I was like, or no, actually, I think that was summer going into sophomore year. But that was before I started developing this fail forward mindset. Because then I was literally over analyzing everything. Analysis paralysis, basically. Where I'd be at the chessboard trying to think 20 moves, 30 moves ahead when I haven't even moved my first piece. And in a lot of ways, that seemed like what was happening here. He's worrying about, being consistent and making sure that listeners are getting what they want when he hasn't even put out a single podcast episode. And I'm not faulting him at all. The dude is awesome. Great guy. But it was just a reminder for me of how important and how powerful this fail forward mindset is. The reason I bring this story up is because this thing happened to me literally this past week. And this kind of gets into personal updates and stuff, but my faith journey has been very, very similar, I think, where I start to overanalyze and I really start caring about, okay, I want to make sure I'm 100% correct. I'm 100% certainty that what I'm doing, what I'm following is the right way to go. And I remember having this really kind of religious conversation. The way they described it is that instead of caring about all the religious things, going to church and jumping through all the hoops of religion, subscribing to a particular sect of Christianity, this person was like, "Oh yeah, I'm way more into a relationship, specifically a relationship with God." Their emphasis on this relationship honestly took me back, because when they said that, I was kind of drilling them with questions. Well, how do you know it's the relationship with the right person? How do you know that some other relationship isn't better? Like all these questions. And now when I look back, literally just that week, a couple days ago, honestly, it reminds me of the same type of mindset where I'm too scared to fail. Because in the same way that this one dude was too afraid to put his first podcast episode because he's thinking about all these things down the road, it was the same way with me. I was too afraid to commit to some type of relationship, specifically a relationship with God, because I was afraid of how things would turn out later and finding out that it might not be the best relationship, or it might be a relationship with the wrong person. But I think now, and having this reality check again and saying to myself, okay, I'm at least going to try. I'm at least going to start taking the steps forward, start trying to build that relationship and see where things go. Because I'd much rather start walking now and seeing where things end up than just strategizing about the best way to move forward and not even take the first step forward. So that's what's been top of mind, especially with that story. I think it fits super well with what I learned this past weekend. And I'll talk more about it, but bro, this past weekend in Barcelona was a dub. It was awesome. And for a lot of reasons, not only was it super fun hanging out with a whole bunch of people, great conversations, but I think I actually personally did a lot of growing. And it's probably a big reason of why I'm recording this episode in the first place, was because of that growth that I went through. And I'm not talking growth in just what I mentioned earlier, this religious aspect, but I'm talking about growth and also productivity and getting my work done. Because knowing that I don't have my weekends to just procrastinate and push work off means I really want to stay on top of my stuff. So all of that's been good. More on that in the life update, but moving on to the next section of this podcast, the philosophizing section. These are random things that I've thought about since the last episode. But the first one, I talked about in one of my philosophy classes. It's an ancient history philosophy class, so we talk about Plato and Aristotle and all those fools. But specifically, when Socrates talks about what he calls the three goods. First, I'll explain the concept, and then I'll give an analogy to tie it all together. The first good is something that is intrinsic. Intrinsic goods are like joy. Another type of good is instrumental goods. These are those types of goods that lead to something else. They're an instrument to getting what you really want. And a great example of this, I think, is money. Like, sure, money is great, and it's not really intrinsically good. Like, money's very nature, you wouldn't say it's completely good. But what you might be able to say is that money is an instrument to getting some type of good. For example, let's say my motivation for coming to college, for getting a job, for making money, truly is just to provide for my family. And so sure, money in some ways could be evil to other people, but in this case, it is an instrumental good because of the good that it provides for my family. And then a third type of good that Socrates identifies is a combination of the two, something that's both intrinsically good and instrumentally good. And the example that he talks about is knowledge. So why is knowledge good? Is because in some ways it's just intrinsically good. It's just good in general to know things. But on top of that, we can use those things to do other things, to lead to good outcomes. But here's an analogy that I think will tie it all together and really hit home for me. When I first started working out, it was originally just an instrumental good. I didn't start working out because I love working out or anything. The reason I started working out was to just be in better shape. And honestly, at the start of it, it was just to get girls. But over time, it started to be about health. And so even then, working out was still this instrumental good to eventually have better health. But as I've been working out more and more and more, eventually I've gotten to this point, and this is where I'm at now. Working out has become a combination of the two. It's become an intrinsic good because working out itself is what I get joy from. Working out has become this intrinsically good thing in my life. And there's honestly still a lot there that I could philosophize about, like what the heck it means for something to be intrinsically good, and if I get joy from working out, then isn't that still an instrumental good? Yeah. There's all these other things I could keep going on and on about. But I remember ages ago, I was talking about learning and how, in my eyes, I didn't really see why learning would be good if you're just learning to learn. But I think with this framework, it kind of makes it all fit together, where sure, learning is intrinsically good, gaining knowledge is intrinsically good. But I think what's even better is when it can become this combination of both. When it's intrinsically good, but also instrumentally good. It doesn't just have value simply for the sake of what it is, but it also leads to certain outcomes, which is probably the practical, pragmatic side in me. But anyways, the other big thing I've been thinking about is balancing what I call the objective and the subjective. And if you remember, whenever I talk about the virtue-vice scale, it's always balancing one side with another. And here are some examples. Something like balancing confidence and humility. And the reason I call it the virtue-vice scale is because when each of these virtues are pushed to the extreme, they become a vice. When you're too confident, you become super egotistical. When you're too humble, you become a pushover. But finding the balance of these two is key. And so as I've applied this framework over and over and over again across a whole bunch of different categories, a whole bunch of different words, different virtues, I've come to, at the end of the day, find that it always comes back to these major distinctions: balancing the subjective and the objective, where one side seems to be related to, in some ways, subjectivity, and the other side is related to objectivity. Here are a couple examples from earlier in this episode. One that I think fits really well, especially applying to Christianity specifically, is balancing law and gospel. Law is making sure to follow the rules, and gospel would be God's grace. that he gives us freely. So law is the objective part and gospel would be the subjective part. Here's another one. Accountability and forgiveness. Where you can imagine if you're raising a child and they do something wrong, how do you respond to that? Because if you hold them accountable and you're super strict and disciplined with them, and you take that to the extreme, it becomes pretty harsh in ways and could destroy the relationship or at least damage it. But if you forgive them and you forgive them too much, it gets to the point where they start thinking that you're a pushover and then they do whatever they want and you encourage their bad behavior. Like a kid who's at home always playing video games and you try to tell them stop playing video games and they're like, no. And you just let them go because you're all about forgiveness. This is another example where the objective part is accountability and the subjective part is forgiveness. And I've seen this over and over and over again, but what I think it stands out the most in, I've seen it personally, is balancing emotions with logic. In this example, logic is the objective part and emotions is the subjective part. So this personally, I thought it was a pretty big breakthrough because in the first place, the virtue vice scale, I think was a pretty cool epiphany, but this specific epiphany where all of these virtue vice scales seems to in some ways map on to the objective and the subjective really makes a lot of sense for me. I'm trying to think more about how to apply this to different things. But anyways, moving on to L's of the week. These are other L's that I've taken since the last podcast episode. I think probably the biggest L's would have something to do with health for sure, where either I haven't been staying on top of my diet or maybe missed a couple workouts. But that honestly hasn't been too big of the L that I've taken. I think the biggest L that I have taken is probably a huge hit to my sleep would be the biggest thing. Because man, my sleep has taken a huge hit. Actually, it hasn't taken a huge hit recently. My sleep after the trip to Barcelona has gotten better. But my sleep over the past, let's say 3 weeks before, it has not been the best. And because of that, it affects every part of my life, especially when it comes to how much work I can get done. Because if I don't have enough sleep, I don't have enough energy to think, means I don't have enough energy to do work, means I just sit around and watch YouTube or anime all day and I don't get stuff done. So that is probably the biggest L, is sleep. But luckily, I've been improving on it. And the best way I've been improving on it is just being more on top of my night routine. Really honing that part in has helped me a ton, at least in the past couple days of getting better with sleep. But on to the weekly roundup. Different things I have found since the last podcast episode. These are quotes, books, random things like that. But the first quote I found, and this actually ties super well with the story that I had for today. But the first quote is, if you don't fail, you're not trying hard enough. And honestly, someone else might have said this before, but I heard it from this dude who came in to speak with us at the garage. It's the startup incubator out here at Northwestern. But he's the CEO, founder of FranShares. It's kind of like Fundrise, but for franchises. So it just allows everyday people to invest in franchises. And he's telling us his story. First of all, he's a really interesting dude because he seems like the type who is naturally just socially awkward, but he has practiced so much of sales and conversations and public speaking and all those things where he can kind of get by. And not only get by, but actually do pretty well. But I could tell, like, I don't know, there's something about him that I found in myself actually. Because I was very similar. I was a very socially awkward kid. But simply by putting myself out there more and trying to talk to more people, I think caddying also was a huge benefit for me. But by doing all that stuff, now I can hold a good conversation with random people. The podcast I found is called Three Faiths. And this was actually a podcast that someone else recommended to me. The person who I had that religious conversation with, the Christian, was like, it should be more about the relationship, not specifically the religion. And it was a great reminder for me in that way. But they recommended this podcast. I was listening to it. And there's a specific episode where it defines faith in a way that I find super compelling. And I just love this definition of faith. Because especially growing up in this LDS Mormon church, the way I've heard faith talked about is like, oh, it's kind of ignoring the evidence in some ways, or it's just believing without seeing, things like that. But this was the definition of faith that they talked about in the podcast episode. They defined it as believing something based on evidence and living as if it were true. And I actually love this definition because it brings in this element of evidence, which I still to this day, I think it's very, very important. Because once you start throwing out the evidence, then you can just care about willy-nilly stuff. And then it's like, okay, who cares about whatever? Because you can make up whatever you want to believe. but including this element of the evidence, but also tying in the fact that living as if it were true. It's taking this pragmatic step, taking this step of faith, because by all means, the evidence that you believe on could be wrong, or at least you could be misled by the evidence, and acknowledging that, but still taking that step forward, still living as if it were true. That is the piece that I think is super, super powerful. The episode name is called 3 Levels of Faith, but just that part, that definition of faith for me is why it was such a good episode. Moving on to the article that I found, this was an interesting one and probably going to be super controversial, but I doubt too many people listen to this, and maybe years from now, low-key, it would be interesting if years from now people found this episode and they would cancel me because I talk about this. But I'm gonna talk about it anyways, because I think it's a fascinating discussion and probably one that needs to be had. But anyways, there's this paper called In Defense of Transracialism. First of all, it is a fascinating topic. But to explain what transracialism is, it's kind of in the same vein as transgender, where someone who is born of a certain gender wants to transition to a different gender because they feel this sense of desire, this sense of I am not in the right body, I wasn't born in the right body, and so I identify more with this other gender, so they make that transition. Racialism is kind of in a similar vein. I don't feel like I was born in the right race, and so I want to transition to a different race, or I want to identify with a different race. And before you start like, oh, thinking this is terrible, this is so dumb, I honestly think being intellectually honest, being super curious, because I was the same way. I was like, bro, this is dumb. Like, who would ever believe in this stuff? But I dove into this paper called In Defense of Transracialism, written by this philosophy professor. I think her name is Rachel Tuval. It was this fascinating paper defending transracialism. And it gave, honestly, what I thought was super compelling arguments. I thought they really held up. And the counter arguments that I found honestly didn't hold up. The counter arguments I found were just mainly attacking her and attacking why she would defend these things. I was like, bro, what? But I'm still looking into it. The moral of the story is that it's a fascinating paper, and if you love challenging your beliefs, then this paper will definitely challenge your beliefs. At least that's what it did to me. It challenged my beliefs like insanely, and still today is challenging my beliefs, and I'm trying to figure out where I stand on the issue. I won't go into the arguments in this episode, but I'll leave it as an open book. If you want to challenge your beliefs, check out the paper. It's a fascinating paper. But now on to the life update. Okay, where do I start? First, update on my God. The update on this one, I think I've kind of talked about it already, but it's also going to be my weekly intention, is trying to build or rekindle or strengthen my relationship with God. Because I noticed for the past month, for the past 2 months even, I've been calling myself a Christian. I've been, oh yeah, I consider myself Christian, which is, I don't know why, but I think different than if I say I am Christian. It's kind of like, oh, I consider myself Tongan rather than saying I am Tongan. There seems to be some type of difference where one is way more affirmative, whereas one is like a preference thing. It's kind of like this. It's saying I like rock climbing versus I am a rock climber. That to me seems like a big difference. And for the past 2 months, that's what I've been doing. I'm saying like, oh, I consider myself Christian. When in reality, the thing that I was too afraid of is being wrong about which denomination of Christianity I pursue, when I haven't even taken the first step forward. And the first step forward is building this relationship with God. And so that's what I want to do over the next week. And I've already tried to start doing it. And I'm seeing, first off, the benefits it has had to my life, but also just an overall joy, an overall gratitude or a sense of happiness that has come from trying to do this. But good updates on that front. Update on myself. I think this ties honestly super well with the update on my God, because it is very intertwined. And all of these things in general are very intertwined, because when I strengthen my relationship with God, then it means that I can take care of myself better, which means I can take care of my people better, which means I can take care of my work better, and everything just has this trickle-down effect. And so I think this is why people say to prioritize God first, is because when you put God first, everything else falls into place. I think that's probably why. And at least within the past couple of days, I've seen that firsthand, or I've experienced it. But like I mentioned, my sleep has been getting better. And it's kind of weird, especially after the Barcelona trip, where I literally went for a weekend. I came back and my sleep was better than when I left. I don't know how I timed it so perfectly, but being able to sleep exactly at 12, wake up exactly at 9, that was kind of a dub. But an update on my people, Bro, it's been kind of awesome getting to go on these trips. First of all, super blessed, super grateful that I can fly for free with these standby benefits. But it has been so cool to just explore the world, explore these new cultures, meet a whole bunch of random people. I met so many people in the past, not even in the past week, during the weekend specifically, that I would have never met otherwise and had conversations that I never would have had otherwise. That I'm honestly so grateful that I went on those trips, because that's what it's about. It's like not only having fun, being able to meet these people and have these great conversations. I think that's just awesome. And finally, update on my work. Let's see, so much has happened. Okay, first of all, I've definitely been on the back burner with We Are Nation. And I was kind of having this conversation with someone else who was asking me about updates with the startup and like, oh, what my plans are for it, different things like that. And I thought about it for a while. And I think I've come to the point where I've learned as much as I can with We Are Nation. And honestly, this is probably me just not knowing enough. But I think there are other options out there. For example, working for a startup, working directly with the founder who's actually doing the thing and building some AI tech company. I think I would learn more that route than continuing to build We Are Nation and continuing to pour my effort with We Are Nation. That's what I've been thinking about, especially lately when it comes to my work. And in the same vein, I started last week, or it might have been 2 weeks ago, but I started interning with this YC startup called Roundabout. They're like an AI traffic light company. So they just make those traffic lights better by using AI. And so honestly really cool. If you go into a Tesla for the first time, my mind was blown. The way everything was mapped in reality to that screen. Like it could see the people, it could see the cars, it could even see the traffic lights. Exactly what these traffic lights are doing. It's like the traffic lights get a vision, they can see the people, they can see the cars, and using AI or machine learning, it's able to predict when the best times are for it to change to a red light or a green light or a yellow light and let people walk or let bikes go and let cars go, things like that. So that's what they're building, and I'm helping them. It was honestly kind of a perfect fit. And this is a prime example of luck, because the reason I found this job posting or this startup was because one of the founders is an Evans Scholar, a Northwestern Evans Scholar. And they sent a post to our Evans Scholar Facebook group. And usually I never check Facebook, but for some reason, this particular day, I checked Facebook and I went to the group and I saw the post. I was like, bro, I am on it. Not only did I see the post, I only saw the post like a day late. So it was pretty early on. I did the application, ran that through, first interview, boom, I'm in. And basically what we're doing is just typical cold email outreach stuff. And it's kind of crazy again, because I have a ton of experience with cold email outreach. Not saying that I'm an expert by any means in cold email outreach, but I at least know a little bit. Enough for me to get by and actually provide some value for the start. So we're talking more and more. Hopefully we'll see where that leads to. If that leads into a summer thing, then great. If not, then great. I made a great connection with this YC startup and get cool experience I can talk about. But the other opportunity that I've been looking at is honestly the only internship I'm actually keen, at least for right now, it's the only internship I'm keen on getting. And it's an internship at Alpine Investors. It's kind of like, hey, it's a PE firm, a private equity firm. But I think the reason I really like this one is specifically because of the founder, Graham Weaver. I'm super into his stuff. And he's all about people first capital, people first leadership, and developing people. Because PE firms, they're not in the business of business, they're in the business of people. And if they can bring in the best leaders, if they can bring in the best talent, then put that talent with the best companies, then they could build a world-class business. And that's honestly why I want to go intern with them. Not specifically for the role itself or for the money, but because the firm itself I really believe in. And I think there are growth opportunities that I can have in my career if I do end up going there. So that's another summer internship opportunity. And what's really cool about this one is that it's in Salt Lake. And more than that, first of all, my family, they're starting to migrate over into Salt Lake, but Salt Lake is one of the newer, I think actually the newest location or office that they've built. So there's only 25 people at that location, and compared to the amount of people that they have throughout the entire company, like that's an insanely small company in this office. And so I think if I can go there now at the growth that they're at, I want to make a huge impact and hopefully just grow in my role grow in the learnings that I can get, meet all these business owners, get involved with some of the portfolio companies, things like that. That's what I envision could happen. But as of right now, nothing is set in stone. I just had the first interview with them, I think literally yesterday or the day before. But we'll see where things go there. Anyways, I don't know. I think lately I've just been, especially when it comes to work, just trying to get stuff done, but just be super curious. Those are two things that I think I've found a lot of value in, is intellectual honesty and childlike curiosity. Those are things that I actually really love, especially with my philosophy major. It just ties in super well, because when I have random conversations with random people and I can be super curious about their lives and about them, because I hope to apply some of the things that I learned into my life. That's all for this episode. It's been a while. I can't lie. But happy I did it. We'll see if I stay consistent with these. I'll have to get into another habit of setting it on a certain day and making sure I'm on top of it. But anyways, hopefully I can get this out soon. And this weekend I'm headed to Paris. Oh man, it's kind of crazy. It's honestly so fun. Last weekend going to Barcelona right in the middle of school. Now this weekend I'm going to Paris right in the middle of school. And I got to finish up these papers. Like I mentioned, I just got to be way more strict with my time, way more on top of things, knowing that I don't have my weekends. Like trying to fit this podcast episode before I leave. Yeah, it was a low-key kind of a tough struggle, but it's okay. I really wanted to do it. Prioritization, time management, that's what it's all about. Let's go. I record these episodes completely free to share success with everyone. So the only thing I ask is that if you learned anything or found something interesting in this episode, just leave a review and share it with a friend. Only takes 5 seconds and it would mean the world. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next episode. Tatok, see you.